March is a big month for American soccer. We'll get to the World Cup qualifying in future videos. Plenty to talk about. I do want to talk this week about two Americans in Europe and how big this month will be for them, including Jesse Marsch, who had his first game in charge of Leeds over the weekend. They lost to Leicester 1-0. It was a very good performance. Leeds should have got a point or even a victory there. I know close is only counts in horseshoes and hand grenades. I know I screwed up that expression, but at least I was close. So it was a good first effort. It seems like the Leeds fans and players were optimistic about staying promoted here. So after that, did the English media want to talk about whether Leeds are going to stay up or get relegated or how they played or Kasper Schmeichel making all those saves? No. It's not what they want to talk about. They wanted to talk about an American-style huddle that Jesse Marsch put together after the game and how it's just not up to snuff in the British game. Now, there's also another element here, and that's the creation of a hit show, which I've watched every episode of, called Ted Lasso. And what it has weaponized the approach of Americans in British football, and we've seen it clear as day. In fact, when Jesse Marsch arrived, he was brought up about comparisons to Ted Lasso. He laughed it off. He says he's not watched the show, but he was gracious and understands why it was brought up. Fair point. Jesse Marsch, first class through and through. But then the game happened, and then it came up again and again. And we will discuss the perception of Americans in Europe here, or in England, here on the Soccer OG. I will apologize for the way I sound. I got to ski up in Taos, New Mexico. I crossed it off my bucket list. I always wanted to get up there. It was very windy. When I came back to Los Angeles, we're dealing with the Santa Ana winds, so I got lit up pretty bad. So it's a bit phlegmy. But you can understand me, right? Right? Okay, I shall continue. It's not ideal, but we shall muscle through this. Check out the Soccer OG podcast, where all podcasts are available. This week I have Charlie Davies, former U.S. international and now CBS sports analyst. We talked about Jesse Marsch and Christian Pulisic, who we'll talk about a little bit later. And we also talked about the chances of the United States in qualifying. We both think they qualify clean. Take a listen to hear what we said about that. And please like and subscribe the video here on YouTube. Let's get back to Jesse Marsch. And this is how it started. Let's go right after the game. Talk Sport is a sports network I listen to a fair bit. I enjoy it. Andy Goldstein, who was a former guest on the Soccer OG podcast, works for Talk Sport. He's a friend of mine. I enjoy listening to him. I enjoy listening to Darren Bent's Boot Room. I listen to it every Sunday on SiriusXM. But it is a shock jock kind of hot take network. Kind of like what we have here with Skip Bayless, Stephen A. Smith kind of things. You take their takes with a grain of salt. So I get it. Gabriel Agbonlahor is one of the analysts, pundits on that network. He addressed Jesse Marsch, and this is what he had to say. He goes, "It was like watching a college basketball huddle." I'm glad he knows what that was. "You don't want to be like Ted Lasso." Everyone laughed. And it wasn't just Agbonlahor, who, by the way, I really liked as a player, but they all chuckled. It was a big joke. "Doing it in the middle of the field was so cringe. Do that in the changing room." I didn't know that was the protocol that you had to do in the changing room, because I've seen many coaches gather their team on the field after a game, whether they were American or German or English, you name it. It happens. Jesse Marsch would say that he did that because, you had a small amount of time and you wanted to catch them, bring them all together. Makes sense. Keep in mind that, Jurgen Klopp's done this. All these German coaches do that. And that is where Jesse Marsch came from, the German game. So, okay. I got a little hot. Spoke to some of my English friends, and they said, look, it's Talk Sport. It's Gabriel Agbonlahor. Take it with a grain of salt, which I did. So I was like, all right. It is what it is. And look, as I told everyone on here, when Jesse Marsch got the job, expect this to happen. I didn't know it was going to happen so fast. They were ready to tear him down the minute he signed that contract. And they came in thick and fast. And look, one game in, this is the story. But I said, okay, Talk Sport. A couple days later, Jesse Marsch Addressing the gathered media, reporter says, people are focusing on the huddle in the middle of the pitch. Was that spontaneous, or is that something you want to continue? I mean, how condescending is that? Is that something you want to continue? As if to say, are you crazy for doing such a thing? I mean, you name it. Patronizing, condescending. So Jesse Marsch, again, gracious and smart. He said, it's hard to have the group together. I hear these Ted Lasso comparisons. It's hilarious and ridiculous. Maybe I do this huddle in a locker room. Maybe I do it on the pitch. Who cares? Exactly. Who cares? Do you see what's happening here? This is the attack on Americans in soccer. Not everyone. The BBC and the ITV and Sky Sports are real professionals, and they're not going to have this line of questioning. But this shouldn't exist at all. Because you see, if I was in the media and we had an English manager come in and I said, hey, so what are you going to do? Drink tea and eat crumpets? And I would get fired. Or I should get fired. That's inappropriate. It's xenophobic. It is, it's just unacceptable. You don't profile people for where they're from. But in England, you can do it without any repercussions. And it really is grotesque. It's not everyone, although it feels like everyone. Because whether it was Bob Bradley, whether it was an American broadcaster or player going there, they had to kind of clear these hurdles. And I get it, and it's good. It toughens them up. But this has been the clearest example of how asinine it is, and how we shouldn't stand for it, and how when the English media says, don't worry, it's like, this is not how... No, this zero tolerance on this crap. And I know I'm being a little sensitive, but it's every time, and every time it happens, it gets worse. So I got a little hot about it. I would love to see Jesse Marsch stick it up their backside with this, if they could. But this is the crux of the issue. Jesse Marsch now has a bunch of games to determine whether an American can coach in the Premier League. I was surprised he got the job. I know he was mentioned for Everton, but he got this gig. Hallelujah. But it's a very tough job. You're following a legend in Marcelo Bielsa. If he keeps Leeds in the Premier League, it's a success. And then it's not a complete success. It's basically the bare minimum of what's expected, quite frankly. That's not my words. I think that's what fans of Leeds and everyone will ask of him. Then he can make a real impression, keeping the job, signing some players, maybe American players, and doing a better job next season. He's a great coach. He has learned his job by spending time not in the United States exclusively, but in Austria and Germany. Granted, his last job didn't go well, but a lot of last jobs don't go well for coaches. That's why it's such a nomadic way of life. So he has a bunch of games coming up. I'm recording this on a Wednesday. He has a home game versus Villa. Then he has Norwich. Then at Wolves. Those are the March games. April, hosts Southampton at Watford. 5 big games. Hopefully he can get over the top. And more than anything, I mean, he's not going to stop the huddle. I can promise you that. He's going to want to get a pound of flesh with his huddle moving forward. So Jesse Marsch now has this huge month of March. Those 3 games we talked about over 8 days to show what he can do. Good start, but it doesn't help with these distractions about people asking him about the huddle. That has to stop. And Ted Lasso has to stop bringing up. It's not the show's fault, but let's be frank. It is theater of the absurd, a college football coach going over to England and taking on a Premier League. But then again, this is entertainment. Anyway, I got a little hot. Let's change the subject here a little bit and talk about the best that I have seen Christian Pulisic play in 2 years. Christian Pulisic, who we speak a lot about here, much maligned, not playing for Chelsea. Then he's playing, and he's playing in a variety of positions that he's not comfortable with. Starting to play left wing regularly. And this past weekend against Burnley at their place, the best game I've seen him play since he had that incredible goal 2 years ago when we got out of COVID against Manchester City. Had a goal. It was a very fortuitous goal, but he put himself in the right position. He had a glorious assist for Kai Havertz. And the front three on that game, which to me is the best trio right now because Romelu Lukaku is in the doghouse. It's not necessarily in the doghouse, but not in favor. But you have Havertz, Pulisic, Mount. Pulisic playing on the left wing side, but he comes on the right a fair bit. And we could discuss how this came about. Was it Tuchel's genius? And Thomas Tuchel is a genius. But to me, it's also part of Christian Pulisic bailing out Tuchel because he doesn't want to play Romelu Lukaku in a lot of these positions. Obviously, Timo Werner and Hakim Ziyech has fallen a little out of favor. He has become the guy that has pushed Chelsea through a very successful stretch. Go back to the Club World Cup, came off the bench to replace Mason Mount, I believe, and he changed that game against Palmeiras. Scored a goal against Lille in the first leg of the round of 16 in the Champions League. Started against Crystal Palace. Started in the League Cup final a couple weekends ago. 4 Premier League goals, a Champions League goal. Keep in mind, Mason Mount's the top scorer at 7, so not far-fetched that Pulisic, after all of this, finishes atop Chelsea scoring ranks. It is a huge development, not only because he's playing well, but he's playing the position he wants to. That is the handiwork of Christian Pulisic. He did this. New Mexico air still in me. So Christian Pulisic now can parlay this, and he's going to be playing against Norwich on Thursday. So we can watch that together, and maybe you can watch the video. I don't know how that's going to turn out. Big game because it's going to be Pulisic and Josh Sargent, who I told you here is ascending. I think he might start the game at the Azteca. I really do. We'll check back on that in a little bit. Speaking of that game, and yes, Weston McKennie's out, and Gio Reyna looks like he's going to miss it too. This is the moment for Christian Pulisic. This is setting up that he doesn't get injured because it's always a possibility. He's playing so well. And he's, when I spoke to Charlie Davies on the podcast, check it out. He said this, and he's 100% right. When the cards are down, Christian Pulisic always responds. He has been dealt bad cards going back to 2017 in Cuba. He has responded, and he's done it several times with his club. He's done it again. He was the best player on the field against Burnley. It's not just the goal and the assist. I watched the whole game. He controlled it. And he's done that over multiple games over the last few weeks. So I'm getting a very good feeling that this could be the Christian Pulisic opus, if not at the Azteca, then certainly against Panama in Orlando. So, very exciting stuff indeed. We shall see what comes of it. But we have 2 pieces of homework that you guys all have to stay on top of. Obviously, what Jesse Marsch can do. We can see that on Thursday. Obviously, what Christian Pulisic. And that's what the Soccer OG is all about. To get you ready for all of this, because there's never a dull minute. When I started this, I thought I would really be struggling to have subject matter. That is not the case. It's overflowing because Americans are in the ascendancy at the height of this sport where we are seeing them at the big clubs making the big stories. I mean, this Jesse Marsch story was one of the biggest stories in England. I was on all the front pages. That's how significant it is. But that's how much pressure is on Jesse Marsch. And a lot of pressure on Christian Pulisic coming up as well. Speaking of the Champions League, we talked about Americans in it. Obviously, Weston McKennie's not going to be there. Zach Steffen, Man City have moved on, but probably not going to play any games. But we will get either Tim Weah or Christian Pulisic. And I think it's going to be Christian Pulisic, and we shall see moving forward what he can do in that competition. Could be a huge finish to 2022 for this young man who continues to lift the banner in so many ways. I want to talk a little bit more, but as you can see, maybe need to shut it down. Lots of homework. And as always, check out the Soccer OG podcast and like and subscribe to Soccer OG right here. We'll be back this weekend with another video. Placido Domingo.